I have never lived anywhere longer than 6 months. I want to say that at the front, because everything else in this story leans on it. From the time I was 22 until the fall I turned 33, I lived out of a duffel bag and a hard case, in motels and extended stays and one converted bunkhouse in South Dakota, in 11 states, on 18 different jobs, not because anything went wrong. Because that is the work. I climb wind turbines. When the project is done, the crew moves, and you are either on the truck or you are not on the crew. I got good at it. There is a whole way of living that people who move for work develop and never talk about. You do not put anything on a wall. You learn which motel has hot water at 5 in the morning, and you learn to be pleasant to a front desk without being memorable, and you keep your toothbrush in the bag even when you are staying 90 days, because a bag half unpacked is a bag you have to pack. 11 years. 18 jobs. I never once took my clothes out of that duffel and put them in a drawer. Then in the fall of 2025, I checked into a 14-unit motor court on US 20 in Ainsworth, Nebraska for a 90-day repower contract, and I was assigned Unit 9. And on the 11th of October, I opened the bottom drawer of that dresser and put my shirts in it. I did it standing up in a room that smelled like every motel room in the Great Plains. And I remember I had to sit down on the end of the bed afterward, because a man who has kept a bag packed for 11 years does not do a thing like that by accident, and I knew exactly what I had just admitted. Her mother had already written me off by then. That was the part I did not know. 6 days before, in an office with a pegboard of key tags behind the counter, a 66-year-old woman named Darlene Ruzicka had asked me 3 questions in a specific order, the same 3 she has asked every man her daughter has ever brought into that office, and I had answered the 3rd one honestly. The 3rd question is, when does your job end? And I had said November 21st. Because it did. My name is Jonah Petrick. I was 33 that fall, and I was a wind turbine technician on a repower crew, which is a thing that did not exist when my father was working and will probably be automated before I'm 60. A repower is when a wind farm that went up 15 or 20 years ago gets new guts. Same towers mostly, new blades, new drivetrain, new controls. You are working 300 feet up inside a nacelle, the size of a school bus, in a steel can that moves when the wind moves, and you go up a ladder inside the tower with a climb assist and a harness and 40 pounds of gear on your back. People always ask if it's scary. It is not scary. It is loud, and it is hot in July, and it is cold in a way that gets into the bones in February. And there is a specific feeling that comes when you open the hatch onto the top of the nacelle on a clear morning and stand up on top of a 300-foot machine and look at Nebraska going out flat and gold in every direction, with 100 more of them turning to the horizon. I loved it. I want that on the record too, because otherwise the end of this story sounds like a man giving something up. Here is the wound, and I'll be quick. I grew up in Norfolk, Nebraska, in the same house from birth to 18. My mother, Renata Petrick, has lived in that house for 41 years and still does. My father was a pipeline welder. He was home 4 times a year, more or less. Christmas, and about 10 days in the spring, and whenever a job ended before the next one started. He was not a bad man. He sent money every month of his life, and he never once raised his voice in that house, and when he was home, he was fully home, and my mother made him a plate and put on lipstick to go to the grocery store with him, and it was, for about 9 days, the best house in Nebraska. And then he would go. And I would watch my mother stand in the driveway in Norfolk and wave with her whole arm until the truck turned at the end of Brash Avenue. She waited 22 years like that. I want to be careful about how I say the next part, because I love my mother and this is not an accusation of her. 22 years of my mother's life were organized around a man arriving. That was the load-bearing wall of that whole house. And around the time I was 15, I made a decision in my body that I did not put into words until I was 33, standing in a motel courtyard in Ainsworth, and the decision was this: I am never going to be the one in the driveway. So I took a job where I am always the one in the truck. 11 years, 18 jobs, 3 or 4 women along the way who I liked very much and who all figured out inside of 5 months that they were dating a departure date. I thought I was avoiding my father. It took a woman who had never lived anywhere but one motel on one highway to point out that I had spent 11 years running from my mother. The Prairie Rose Motor Court sits on the west edge of Ainsworth on US 20, which the state of Nebraska calls the Bridges to Buttes Byway, and which everybody out there calls the 20. 14 units in an L, single story, white with green doors, gravel lot. A neon sign with a rose on it that has been repaired so many times that the R runs about a half second behind the rest of it. There was a pool once. It has been filled in with sand and planted with prairie grass since 2004, and it is now the nicest thing on the property. Our crew of 6 checked in on the 29th of September for a 90-day contract on the Repower out north of town. The woman at the desk was 33 years old, wearing a flannel over a Nebraska Game and Parks t-shirt, and she checked in 6 Wintex in about 4 minutes, with the efficiency of a person who has been doing this since she was 15. Adeline Riziker. Addie. She did not flirt. I want to say that because it matters. She was pleasant and fast and completely uninterested, and she gave us 5 units and told Manny that if the crew was going to run laundry at midnight, then somebody was going to clean the lint trap, and Manny, who has been leading crews for 19 years and is not afraid of anything, said yes, ma'am. The first 2 weeks I barely saw her. Wind work in the fall is dawn to dark. You get back at 7. You eat something out of a gas station or off a grill somebody set up in the courtyard, and you sleep. What happened was the courtyard. There is a strip of concrete outside the units with 4 metal chairs on it, the kind with the fan-shaped backs that were on every porch in America in 1962, and at the end of the L is the laundry room. And it turns out that if a man does his own laundry on a Sunday night for 3 weeks running, and a woman is closing up the office and putting the day's cards in the drawer at the same hour, the 2 of you will end up in those chairs. We talked about the wind farm. She had watched them go up in 2008 and knew the county fight about it in more detail than I did. We talked about the highway. She could tell you what the 20 had done to that motel, how it was 11 full nights a week in the 80s, and how the interstate and then the internet had cut it down to hunters in November and pipeline crews, and 1 week of the Sand Hills Rodeo. The 3rd Sunday it got cold enough that she brought out a Coleman lantern and a wool blanket for her knees, and neither of us mentioned that we could have gone inside. She asked me what it was actually like up there. Nobody asks that. People ask if it's scary and then stop listening. So I told her. The climb. The 3 rest platforms, the way the ladder hums a little when the rotor's turning even in a braked machine. What a nacelle smells like. Hot oil and hot brakes and a little ozone. The fact that at the top, in a wind, the tower moves in a slow circle about the width of a dinner plate, and after 2 weeks you stop feeling it, and after 2 years you can tell wind speed by how much it moves. I told her about a morning in Illinois in 2021 when the fog was down at 200 feet and I opened the hatch and came out above it, and there was nothing in any direction but white, and the tops of 11 other turbines coming up out of it like buoys. She was quiet for a second and then she said, "Nobody gets to see that. Couple thousand of us. That's nobody," she said. "That's a rounding error. There's 400 people in this county who'll never see anything like it, and they drive under those things twice a day." Then she said something I did not think about again until November. "That's the trade, though, isn't it? You get the fog, and I get to know which of the 400 takes cream." And I said something stupid and light, and she let me, and we sat there until the lantern got low, and I noticed the thing I noticed, which took me 2 more weeks to understand. She never talked about anything past this year. I would say something about the Colorado job in December, and she would go somewhere else for a half-second and come back. I mentioned once that Manny was thinking of buying a place in Grand Island, and she said, "That's nice for him," in a tone that closed a door I had not known was there. There was a manila envelope on the shelf under the office counter. I saw it 4 or 5 times that fall. It had a return address from Central Community College in Hastings, and it was open at the top, and it never moved from that shelf, not once in 90 days. I did not ask about it for 6 weeks, which was 6 weeks too long. And I'll get to that. On the 5th of October, I met Darlene Ruzicka. Addie had said something on the Sunday about her mother wanting to meet the crew, which I now understand was not true. Darlene had wanted to meet me, and Addie had chosen to present it as a general courtesy in a way that let both of us off the hook. I went over Sunday afternoon. The office is 14 feet by 20. There is a counter, a card file, a rack of Nebraska brochures from 2011, and behind the counter a pegboard with 14 diamond-shaped key tags on it, green plastic, numbered Darlene was 66. Small, ropey grey hair cut short by somebody in a kitchen, reading glasses on a chain. She has run the Prairie Rose since 1979, which means she has run it for 46 years, which means she was 20 when she started. Here is exactly how it went, and I need you to hold on to the shape of it, because you are going to see this scene again. She came out from the back with 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for herself, and set mine on the counter, which meant I stood, and she went around behind the counter, which meant she sat on her stool. Against the wall by the ice machine there is a green folding chair. It stayed folded. She said, "You're the one doing laundry Sunday nights." I said I was. Then she asked me 3 questions. "What do you drive?" I said a 17 Tacoma. "Where's your mother live?" I said Norfolk, and that she'd been in the same house 41 years. Darlene Ruzicka looked at me for a second when I said that. I did not know what I had told her. I thought I was making small talk about my mother. Then she asked the 3rd one, "When does your job end?" And I said, November 21st. Crew moves to Sterling, Colorado, the 1st week of December. She nodded once. She said, "Well, that's honest anyway," and that was it. She asked me nothing else. She talked about the sandhill cranes on the Niobrara for about 4 minutes, and then she said she had linens in the dryer, and I carried my cup out to the courtyard, and I remember thinking, that went fine. It had not gone fine. It had gone the way it always goes. I found out later from Odis that when Darlene Ruzicka takes a man's cup back to the sink herself, instead of leaving it, that means the coffee is finished. Odis Spratt lives in Unit 3 and has since 2013. He is 78, a retired Burlington Northern Carman out of Alliance, and he pays by the month and has a recliner in there and a bird feeder outside the window that Darlene has never once made him take down. He sits in the 2nd metal chair from the left every afternoon, from about 4 to 6 with a transistor radio. He is the one who told me about the 6. 2nd week of October. Addie had gone in and I was out there with my boots off, and Odie said, out of nowhere, the way old men on motel chairs do. You're doing better than most of them. Most of who? You're the 7th one I've seen. He did not look over. Since I moved in. 12 years. 7 fellas out here in these chairs with that girl. That's not really my business. Odie's no, and I'm telling you anyway, because I've watched 6 of them leave and I'm too old to be polite about it. He turned the radio down. There was the one from the co-op, and the schoolteacher, and the fella that sold seed, and the one she was going to marry, and I liked him fine, and he was here 4 years. What happened to him? Same thing that happened to all of them, Odie said. He met Darlene. I asked what that meant, and Odie Spratt said, nothing you'd think. She's not mean to 'em. She don't say a word against anybody. She just asks 'em when the job ends, right off, first visit, and then she waits. And every single one of them heard the question underneath it, and every single one of them answered it inside a year. Which question underneath it? Are you taking her or are you staying? He shrugged. There ain't no third answer at a motel, son. Either she goes with you and Darlene loses the girl and the business both, or you move to Ainsworth, Nebraska, population 1,700, and you tell me what a schoolteacher from Valentine or a fella that sells seed does with that. I sat with that for a while. Then he said, 12 years ago there was a lot more traffic on the 20, and that motel made money, and Addie Ruziker was 21 and had an acceptance letter to a college in Hastings. Addie came out with the trash, and Odie's turned his radio back up, and we never spoke of it again in 12 weeks. That was the night I found out the envelope on the shelf was not from 2013. She saw me look at it while she locked the drawer, and she said, without my asking, it's a reapplication. Nursing program. I do it about every 3 years and then I don't send it. Why don't you send it? Because it's in Hastings, and Hastings is 4 hours away, she said, and because the last 2 winters we didn't clear enough to hire anybody, and because my mother is 66 and gets up at 5 and strips 14 rooms if the hunters come through, and I'm not going to be 4 hours away the first time she can't. I said the exact wrong thing. I said, she'd want you to go. Addie Ruziker looked at me with something that was not unkind and said, everybody says that. It's the sentence men say right before they start explaining my life to me. Then she softened it, which she did not have to do. Look, my mother has never once asked me to stay. Not in 12 years. That's the thing everybody gets wrong about her from the outside. She wiped down a counter that was clean. In 2019, I was engaged to a man named Kyle Dunlap, and we had a date and a deposit on the hall in Bassett. And that January we had 11 straight nights with nobody in a single unit, and I did the books and told him I couldn't leave, and he said he'd wait. And he did, for about 9 months, and then he took a job in Kearney and asked me one time to come, and I said not yet. And that was it. That was it. He's married, 2 kids, and I hope he's happy, and I mean that. She put the rag down. And when he left, my mother didn't say a word about him and hasn't since, and I stood right here and watched her decide something about herself, and I've been living with that decision ever since, and it's got nothing to do with anything she's ever said out loud. Which decision? That she's the reason. Addie looked out the office window at the lot. She thinks I'm alone because of her. She's wrong, and there's not one sentence in the English language that will fix it, and God knows I've tried about 40 of them. I did not have a 41st sentence either. I sat in that office and understood for the first time that there were 3 people on that property, and that the third one, the one behind the counter in the mornings, who had been perfectly nice to me for a month, was carrying the whole thing. The crew lead offer came on the 9th of November. Manny Escrisega had put my name in back in the summer without telling me, The company was standing up a second repower crew for 2026, and they wanted a lead, and it was a real jump. 22,000 more. A truck, my own 6 guys. 46 weeks a year on the road. Colorado in December, then Texas Panhandle, then 2 projects in Illinois they had already inked. I sat in Unit 9 and looked at that email for about an hour. And I did not tell her. That is the thing I have to own. I did not tell her for 4 days, and I told myself it was because I hadn't decided. And that was a lie, because a man who hasn't decided tells the woman he sits in a courtyard with every night. She found out on the 13th, in the office, from Manny, who came in to pay the crew's card and said, cheerfully, being a good friend, "You gonna miss us?" Might get quiet around here without a crew lead in Unit 9. I was standing right there. Addie Rizika did not change her face by 1 degree. She ran the card. She gave Manny his receipt. She said something about the weather Thursday, and she waited until he was out the door and across the lot. Then she said, "How long have you known?" 4 days. Okay. She squared the cards on the counter. "That's a good job, Jonah, Addie, no. I mean it. That's a real good job, and I'd take it, and anybody would." Her voice was completely steady, and that was how I knew how bad it was. "I just want you to know that I'd already done it." In my head. About 2 weeks ago, I let myself do the whole thing. You take the O&M job at the farm here. They hire local site techs. You'd have got it. And you'd be 40 minutes out and home every night. And I sat in this office and thought about that for about an hour like an idiot. That's not idiotic. It is when you've watched it 6 times. She finally looked up. "You know what my mother's going to say?" Nothing. That's the worst part. She's not going to say 1 word. She's going to be perfectly nice to you for 8 more days, and then she's going to strip Unit 9 and put the sheets in and never mention your name again. Because she's done it 6 times, and she's got a system. I haven't decided anything. Jonah. She said my name the way you set down something heavy. You put your shirts in the drawer. I did not know she knew that. "Fern cleans 9 on Thursdays," she said. She told me. In October. Her chin went, once, and she got it back. And I have been carrying that around for a month like a girl, and I'd like it back, please. Then she went in the back, and I stood in a motel office with a pegboard of 14 keys and did not follow her, which is the single stupidest thing I have ever done, and I did it for 4 more days. Manny found me at the base of Tower 9 the next morning, while we were waiting on a crane. He is 51. 19 years leading crews. Divorced in 2011 and remarried in 2016 to a woman in Grand Island who told him at the start that she would give him 3 more years of rotation, and then he was going to make a choice. And he made it, and he has been trying to buy a place there ever since. He said, "I put your name in for that lead. You're mad at me." "I'm not mad at you. You're something." He handed me a coffee out of the truck. "Let me tell you the thing nobody told me. This work is the best job in America for about 11 years. It pays a kid with no degree 80 grand, and it takes him to 19 states, and it makes him useful, and every single guy I've ever led loved it. I hear a but. The but is that it's a young man's life, and there's no ceremony when it stops being one." He looked up the tower. There ain't a bell. Nobody comes and tells you. One day you're 38 in a Days Inn in Tulia, Texas, eating a gas station sandwich, and you realize you've been living the same Tuesday for 16 years, and the only difference is the exit number. And then what? And then you either notice, or you don't notice for another 8 years. He drank his coffee. I got mine on the second pass, Jonah, and it cost me a marriage to learn it. You're getting yours at 33, from a woman who runs a motel. That's a bargain, and you ought to know it's a bargain. I said the lead job was $31,000 more. Manny Escrisega laughed at me, not meanly, the way a man laughs at somebody doing arithmetic with the wrong units, and said, "Sure it is. $31,000 and 46 weeks. Go on and price the weeks." Here is what I did with those 4 days. I worked, and at night I sat in Unit 9 with the television off, and on the third night I walked the L. There are 14 units. 13 of them get rented. Unit 12 is at the far end past the ice machine, and its key tag is the only one on that pegboard that has never come off the board in 12 years. Which I knew, because Odis had mentioned it once the way he mentions everything. I asked him about it in the chairs on the 15th. "That's Emil's," he said. "Who's Emil?" Odis Pratt looked at me for a long moment and decided something. Her husband. Addie's dad. He turned the radio off, which he had not done since October. He run this place with Darlene from 79, and along about 96, 97 they got crossways, and he moved out of the house and into 12. Right here on his own property. Lived in that unit about 8 months. And then one morning in the spring of 98 he wasn't in it. Odis rubbed his jaw. Left the key on the counter. Went to Arizona, is what I heard, and I don't know that anybody ever confirmed it. Addie was 5 or 6. And Darlene never rented it. She keeps it made up, he said. Sheets changed, dusted, towels on the rack. I've seen her go in there with an armload of linens twice a year for 12 years. I sat with that a long time, and I understood what had happened to me on the 5th of October in that office, and it was not what I had thought. Darlene Ruzicka has asked 7 men when their job ends. She is not testing whether they are good men. She already knows they are mostly good men. She is asking the only question that has ever mattered on that property, which is the question her own husband answered by leaving a key on a counter and driving to Arizona. And every single one of them, by answering it honestly and then acting on the honest answer, has confirmed the thing she has believed since 1998, which is that the Prairie Rose Motor Court is a place men leave. She was not running them off. She was running an experiment she desperately wanted to fail 7 times, and it kept coming out the same, and every time it did she got a little more certain, and Addie stood there and watched her mother be right about her again. I went and looked at the O&M posting that night. Site technician, operations and maintenance at the wind farm north of town. Permanent. Local. 9,000 less than what I was making, and 31,000 less than the lead job. Home every night. Then I drove out to Norfolk on Sunday 3 hours, and had lunch with my mother. The house on Brash Avenue has the same kitchen wallpaper it had when I was in 4th grade. She made a roast because I said I was coming, which is a thing she has done for 33 years, and which I have never once told her not to do. My father has been gone 11 years. He came off the road in 2010 when his knees quit, and he was home full-time for 4 years, and both of them were strangers to it and figured it out. And then he died in 2014 in the recliner in that front room. I asked her a question I had never asked in 33 years, which was whether she had ever thought about not being there when he got back. Renata Petrek thought about it and said, once, in 1999. She said it plainly, with no drama at all, and got up and got the coffee. Your Aunt Bev had a place in Fremont, and I had it in my head for about a month. What stopped you? Nothing stopped me, I decided. She sat back down. That's what nobody understands about it, Jonah. Everybody looks at a woman waiting and thinks she's stuck. I wasn't stuck one single day. Then she said, and I liked the waving. That's the part nobody believes. He'd turn at Brash and I'd go in and put the coffee on, and I had a good day after. It wasn't a sad thing until you decided it was. I sat there in a kitchen I grew up in and did not have one word. You were about 15 when you decided it, she said. I remember. You got real quiet about your dad that year, and you never got loud again. I drove back across the sandhills in the dark and pulled into the Prairie Rose at 11 at night and sat in that gravel lot for a while. I had spent 11 years arranging my entire life around a story about my mother's driveway, and I had never once asked my mother about it. I took the O&M job on the 18th of November. Signed it before I told anybody, including her, because I had learned that lesson at a cost. Then I went to find Addie, and she was in the courtyard at dusk in a coat with her arms folded because the wind had come around north and it was 29 degrees. I told her I had taken it. She did not react the way people do in stories. She got angry, which I did not expect, and which I have come to love. Don't do that to me, she said. Do not take a $30,000 cut and hand it to me in a parking lot like a bouquet, because then it's mine to carry, and I'll be looking at you across a table in 9 years wondering. It's not a gift, I said. I made a decision about my own life. You'll notice I did it before I told you, and I did that on purpose, so that it could never be a thing you asked me for. She stopped. And I want to be clear about the arithmetic, I said, because you deserve the real numbers. I don't get to be a crew lead. I do get to be 40 minutes from here and off at 5, and I get to be somebody who unpacks. And I've had 11 years of the other one, and I know exactly what it's worth, which is a great deal of money, and not one single person who knows what time I get home. Addie Ruzicka stood in that courtyard and looked at the office window, where her mother's shape was moving behind the counter, and then she said it, low, barely out loud at all. Nobody stays after they meet my mother. And I said, then I'll meet her twice. She started to say something. I said, right now. Same office, same coffee. I want the 3 questions again, and this time I've got different answers, and I want her to hear them from me and not from you. Then I walked across the gravel and opened that office door for the 2nd time. Here is how the 2nd one went, and you already know the shape. She came out from the back with 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for herself, and set mine on the counter. I stood. She went around behind the counter and sat on her stool. You're the one doing laundry Sunday nights, she said. And I understood that she knew exactly why I was there, and that we were going to do the whole thing anyway, because that is how her generation of Nebraska women handles the largest moments of their lives. Yes, ma'am. What do you drive? Same Tacoma. It's got 211,000 on it now. I'm going to run it out. Where's your mother live? Norfolk. Same house. 41 years. I set the cup down. I had lunch with her Sunday. First time I ever asked her anything real. Turns out I had her whole life wrong for about 20 years, which is my fault and not hers. Darlene Ruzicka's hands went still on the counter. When does your job end? And I said, it ended Friday. I took the site tech position at the farm north of town. Operations and maintenance, permanent, no rotation. I start the 2nd of December. I'm going to look at that little brick place on East 2nd on Saturday because it's got a garage I can put a bench in. I looked at her. So the answer to your 3rd question is that it doesn't. That's the whole answer, and I'm aware that it's just words, and I'm aware you've heard words. So you'll want to check on it. Take your time. I'll be here in the spring, and I'll be here in the fall, and you can keep asking me the same 3 questions every October for as long as you want to. The office was very quiet. The ice machine cycled. Darlene Ruzicka took her glasses off and set them on the counter, and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes for about 4 seconds, and put them back on. Then she got up off that stool, and walked around the counter and picked up the green folding chair from beside the ice machine, and opened it and set it down facing hers. "Sit down," she said. "You're not drinking that standing up. I started at the wind farm on the 2nd of December and I have been there since. Site tech, and then site lead in 2029. 40 minutes out, home by 5:40 most days, and on the clear mornings I still open a hatch 300 feet up and stand on top of a machine and look at all that country, and then I come down and drive home. Which is the part I did not know you could have." Addie sent the envelope in January. "The nursing program in Hastings takes it part-time now, online for the didactic and clinicals at the hospital in Valentine, and it took her 4 years instead of 2, and I have never in my life been prouder of anything than I was sitting in that folding chair auditorium in 2030 while they read her name." Darlene hired Fern's niece for the desk, then another girl. The motel does about the same business it did, which is not much, and it does not need to do much, and Darlene Ruzicka is 72 and gets up at 5 and will die on that property, and everyone involved has made peace with it. We were married in June of 2027, in the courtyard, with the grass where the pool was, and Odie Spratt in the front row in the good chair at 80, and my mother drove over from Norfolk, and she and Darlene sat next to each other and talked for 3 hours about husbands, which I did not have the nerve to eavesdrop on. And in the spring of 2028, Darlene rented Unit 12. She did not announce it. There was a pipeline crew through in April, and they needed 6 rooms and she had 5, and I was standing at the counter when she turned around and took that green tag off the pegboard for the first time in 30 years, and slid it across to a foreman from Broken Bow, who has no idea to this day what he was handed. She did not say anything about it. Neither did I. But that night after they'd all gone out to eat, I found her sitting in the courtyard in the second chair from the left with the radio off, looking down the L at that door. She said, "Nobody's been in there since 98. I said I knew. And she said, "Well, it's a motel."